We have one more point that I wanted to review before we continue to the topic of modesty, which is seems like one of the topics that obsesses most the rabbis when they write about when it comes to the women's issues. So there are several. She's a contemporary poet. There are many wonderful contemporary poets in Israel today, in the world, that write about, there are Jewish women writing not just poetry, but poetry that has to do with that junction of Judaism and feminism. But I chose her for two reasons. One, because she's an expert on Kabbalah and Jewish philosophy, so her works are infused with that literature. You could see Kabbalah, you could see ideas of the interpretation of the Tanakh according to Moreh Nevuchim and other philosophers and Kabbalists. That's one reason. The second is that she's my sister, so I have more knowledge of her poetry, and I see it interesting as coming from the lineage of rabbi-ovadia, my great grandfather, who himself was a poet, and he wrote the Zechut Rahel, and that ran in the family sort of. So it interested me to see how my great aunt Lulu, who wanted to study Tanakh, wanted to study Talmud, but wasn't able to. But eventually, it did run in the genes, sort of, or the tradition of the family. So I wanted to share those 2 poems. So let me share the screen 1 second.
Which page are you on?
This poem is called Atasha Malchut, and I'm going to highlight some. I'll translate it. It's some of her work has been translated. Professor Haviva. Yeah, her name is. Yeah, it's on in the scan. Her name is Professor Haviva Pedaya. That's a paraphrase of my great grandfather named Pedaya. My grandfather used to sign sometimes his name when he came to Israel as Pedaya, from the word Padui, redeemed. So she goes by that, Haviva Pedaya. She teaches in the Ben Gurion University Jewish philosophy and Kabbalah, and she's involved in many other projects of education and Sephardic culture in Israel. So this poem, and some of her poems, I said, were translated to English. I think you could find some of her translated material online. I'll read the whole poem and then I'll translate. עתה שהמלכות ניתנה לחיצונים, ובניך בכלל הגולים המגועלים ננוד ברוח. So, okay, that phrase. Now that the kingdom was given to the outsiders, and your children are among those who are expelled and rejected, we are going to sway in the wind. עתה ככל שדק מאוד העור, איננו זך ואינו למאור. Now that our skin got thinner and thinner, it is not pure, it does not serve for light. עתה שאנו בכלל המכים תוך השקים הריקים. Now that we are among those who rattle within the empty bags. עתה שעצום המרחק שפעם היה דק מן הדק. Now that the distance is tremendous, whereas originally it was very, very narrow, very thin. עתה שאיננו בכלל שוכני הגן. Now that we are not among those who dwell in the garden. עתה בזוכרנו את קדמוננו אדם ואיך. Now that we remember our first father Adam, ואיך שהיינו בקומתו אחוזים, and how we were entangled or attached to his stature. ועתה מפניך תלושים. Now that we are driven away from you. עתה שאנו בוכים. Now that we are crying. עתה שידנו הפשוטה לתת נטמאת. Now that our hand, which is extended to give, has been contaminated and impure. ונשמתנו בחדרים נוצצת, נפרצת. עתה שברוח ננוד. And our soul, which used to shine in the inner rooms, has been exposed. The walls have been broken. Now we sway in the wind. So that poem reflects as I said, her knowledge of philosophy, of Tanakh, and I think my interpretation of the poem, it's the idea of galut, the idea of loss, and the desire to go back to where we were before, sort of the lost, the paradise lost. But the terminology in line 1, Hamalchut nitna lahitzonim, that is a concept that appears in Kabbalah as the idea of the fall from grace, and the Malchut, which is the lowest Sephirah, the lowest of the 10 Sephirot, is under the control of the Hitzonim, of the outside forces, the Sitra Ahara, the other side. Now that we, your children, have been exiled, that's not necessarily part of Kabbalah, we sway in the wind. That is probably a reference to the statement of the rabbi, is that we sway in the wind when God punishes us, but we're not like a tree that breaks completely. So we have some flexibility, but that it's a sense of both being planted in one place but not being stable. I'm not going to analyze the whole poem. It's worth reading more in depth. But the idea of atzuma merhak shepa'am haya dak min hadak, great distance, whereas in the beginning we were all close together. It's the idea of it's like the Big Bang of Kabbalah. The idea that originally there was one soul, and that soul was attached to the throne of God, or to the divinity itself, and then with the creation of Adam and with the sin, it keeps drifting away and being split into smaller pieces. In line 11, we remember Adam and how we were attached to his stature. This idea that has been specifically developed by the Arizal, that Adam had contained in him the souls of all future generations, and those who were part of his head or brain are the more successful, that represent the intelligentsia and the leadership, and those who are from the soul are the lesser people. That's how they turn out to be later on. There is some air of determinism, and of what choice do we have, but we'll get later to it in Kabbalah and philosophy. And in line 14 and 15 is actually a statement that draws upon a Mishnah. The first Mishnah in Masechet Shabbat speaks about the poor man who stands outside and extends his hand into the house to receive something from the Baal Habayit, from his patron or the landlord. And now we have this imagery of someone standing outside, and he wants to extend his hand inside to give something, but it becomes impure, meaning that we are like poor people in front of God, and we cannot deliver to God what He wants from us. So, and the next poem in page 41 in the reader, I just want to highlight another reference to the to Kabbalah. Here she speaks about that. Yeshno hamakom hakatan biyoter bogar halev im atzmo kei bilvav yamim v'zohar. That's that there is that tiny place where the heart lives with itself, and there is silence there. But or im atzma mithalechet elo mechitza. There are no mechitza. There are no curtains. This is the idea of being as close to God as possible. And in line 9, there is this statement: makom ehad v'hu katan kinkuda. There is this one place which tiny like a dot. This is the sort of the opening paragraph of the Zohar, speaking about the tiny dot, a black dot, from that was hid by what is called nitzotza de kardinuta, a spark of darkness. Some would call it. Some are not sure about the exact meaning of the word kardinuta, but that's, as I mentioned before, the idea of the sort of the Big Bang of Kabbalah, this spiritual abundance that is originally concentrated in one place and all is together, and then spreads. So this is a sample of her poetry. there's a flourishing today in Israel of religious women who write poetry. And when I say religious, from not what with labels of denominations, but rather people who draw upon religious material, tradition material, or express their belief in God. Because I think that also poetry that argues with God and questions God is also religious poetry. Because if one does not believe, she wouldn't argue for that. And there's also an excellent anthology that I would recommend for modern Hebrew poetry. It's not only by women, but there are a lot of women writers there. It's called Lanetzach Anagnech. It's I'll send you the name if you want. And that anthology, edited by Malka Shaked, is of modern Hebrew poetry that draws upon the Bible, either a dialogue or a confrontation, and it goes all the way from the creation of the world throughout the Tanakh. Most of the important pieces of modern Jewish Hebrew poetry from the 19th century on, from the 20th century on, are there in relation to the verses in the Tanakh. Okay, so with that we conclude our survey of women in Sephardic literature, or Sephardic women in that field of poetry. We go to the next one, which is modesty. That's our next theme, modesty. There's a lot of literature about modesty, and most commonly it is written by men about women, and that comes from a place of what I believe is control. There is no. So we now segue to the next topic, which is modesty, and we'll start with an entry from Maimonides. And have in mind that what we read here, like the other segments, a lot of this has to do with the society, with the environment, and a lot of this also has to do with the personal approach of rabbis that has developed from rabbinical times. And some things were taken verbatim and face value in later periods. But the whole discussion of modesty, in my opinion, really comes from a point of control. That for the rabbis, for the religious leaders, even today, in all societies, the idea of controlling what they think is breeds the sexual drive, sexual desire, is the most important thing, because it's something that's hard to control, and that's where they have the power. Interestingly enough, in the Tanakh itself, there's no direct reference to modesty. I have an audio class on that. You could listen to it, and textual proof. There's no real discussion in the Tanakh about modesty. There's a discussion about modest behavior and against promiscuity, but you don't find anywhere in the Tanakh any statement that tells a man or a woman how to dress modestly. But that is something that we see in a little bit in the Mishnah, but mostly in the Talmudic literature, probably as a reaction to the Greek culture that invaded Eretz Yisrael, and the famous discussion of one cannot see tefah ba'isha, an exposed part of the body of the woman, or the hair, or hear the voice. It all comes from a very late period, like third, fourth century. So one really should question, where was it before? Could be the campaign of one person or a group of rabbis who started that. I think that in terms of side, this is my theory. I have to do more research on the topic. But the interesting thing is that the rabbi who mentions in the Talmud, who comes up with the idea that he who looks at a woman for the purpose of enjoying that sight will be punished, and then later on goes on to say that one cannot look, etc., was blind. Then was Rav Sheshet, and he was blind. So my theory is that he might have lost his eyesight at an older age, which was very common at the time. Eye diseases were not treatable. There was no way to cure them, and many people lost their eyesight at an older age. And maybe he attributed it to he was looking for sins. What did I do wrong? Why did God punish me? We know that the rabbis did that when they looked at Yitzhak and Yaakov, and they asked why did they lose their eyesight when they were old? And the simple answer of old age did not satisfy them. They were looking for a certain reason. So with the Yitzhak, they said because of the instance of his pagan daughters-in-law, etc., etc. So I think that this rabbi maybe felt that he was punished because of something that he did in his youth, and therefore start promoting that idea that one should not look at women because he will be punished. But again, just a theory. I could send you the links to the corresponding sugyot in the Mishnah. But we're dealing with the literature of the Sephardic sages. We're looking at Maimonides. That's part of his Mishneh Torah. And sorry, this is his commentary on Avot. There's this one Mishnah in Avot that is really upsetting, where the Mishnah says, "Kol hamarbe sicha im ha'isha gorem ra'a le'atzmo v'sofo yoresh gehinam." He who speaks with the woman for too long causes it damages his soul, and eventually he will inherit Gehinnom, meaning he will not go to Gan Eden, he will go to the netherworld. I'm going to say for lack of a better word. So on that, if you look at the commentaries on this Mishnah, you will find a lot of negativity. Any commentator that you look at, it's very hard to take this Mishnah and look at it in a positive view. There's a famous story in the Talmud about Beruria, the wife of Rabbi Meir, who ran into Rabbi Yosef Glili, a colleague of her husband, and Rabbi Meir asked her, "Be'ezo derech nelech lelod?" Which path should we take to get to the city of Lod? So she kicked him, and she said, "Gilili shote, you fool Galilean. Haya lecha lomar be'ezo lelod." You should have said in Hebrew, be'ezo lelod, meaning only 2 words. You used 4 words. Be'ezo derech nelech lelod. You could have said be'ezo lelod, how Lod, or where Lod, whatever. And she added, didn't your friend say that he who talks to the woman damages his soul? So obviously she was upset about that. And she rebuked him. And she didn't win that argument, because in later generations, legends were created about her to sort of tarnish her reputation, because it was hard for the authorities to accept that there is a learned woman who could challenge them and argue with them. Anyway, that is the Mishnah. We'll go back to the commentary of Rambam. Look what he says. וידוע כי השיחה עם אנשים על הרוב אמנם היא בענייני הביאה, ולפיכך אמר שלהרבות שיחה עמהן אסור, לפי שהוא גורם רעה לעצמו. He says it is known that the majority of talk with women is about matters of sexuality. Because of this, he, the author of the Mishnah, said that the increasing conversation with them is forbidden, and he will cause evil to himself. He means to say that he who talks to women acquires lowly traits for his soul, and that is the abundance of desire. He goes on to say here, "V'sofo yoresh gehinam," he will inherit Gehinom. Lema shetavi elav zot hasicha min hameri, because this conversation will cause him to rebel, to go against the law. V'yitchayev ha'onesh alav, and he will be punished for that. And it is obvious that the original statement in the Mishnah that admonished men against talking to women was stemmed from a place of modesty, trying to separate between the genders. Later on in the Mishnah, there is an addition. They said, "Be'ishto amru kal v'chomer be'eshet havero." This is. Let me go one second there. I'll show you that text. we see here, Yosef ben Yohanan Omer, Al tarbe siha im ha'isha. Now, don't talk too much to a woman. Then it goes on to say, Be'ishto amru, kal v'chomer be'eshet havero. That was said about one's own wife, even more so when it's the wife of someone else. Mikan amru hachamim. From here, the rabbis deduced that as long as one speaks to a woman, he causes evil to himself. He loses the time in which he could study Torah, and eventually he will inherit Gehinom. Now, it is important to know that the Mishnah contains layers. That is a discussion that has to be done when we study Mishnah in general. The Mishnah is not a work that was created at one time, nor what is fully edited. The work of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi was basically to take already pre-existing material and put it together. And because the Mishnah was written over a period of maybe 100, 150, if not more, years, sometimes, and it was transmitted orally, the commentary that people made in one generation became part of the Mishnah in the next generation, because the text was transmitted with the commentary. And you don't transmit the text orally by saying open parenthesis, close parenthesis, right? So here is a clear example of a commentary that entered the original text of the Mishnah. This is where the original Mishnah ended. Sorry, here. Ve'al tarbe siha im ha'isha. And that is in line with the other Mishnayot in the chapter. All of them are very short maxims. These are the first generation of rabbis from the early generations, from the time of Knesset Gedolah, the Great Assembly, to the time of Hillel v'Shammai. So they all say three things, and it's like staccato. It's 1, 2, 3. There's not too much discussion. הוא היה אומר, על שלושה דברים העולם עומד, על התורה, על העבודה, על גמילות חסדים. Then Yosef ben Yoezer, I'm skipping Antignos because he only said one thing. Yosef ben Yoezer, Yehi betcha bedvad l'chachamim. Your house should be a gathering place for the rabbis or the sages. Heve midabek ba'afar raglehem. Sit at their feet. Veve shoteh betzamai divrem, and listen to them. I'll go back to Yosef ben Yohanan later. Yehoshua ben Parahya omer, aseh lecha rav. Make a master for yourself. K'nei lecha haver, have a friend. Heve dan et kol adam lekav zchut, dan judge everyone favorably. 1, 2, 3. Nitaya arbeli in Mishnah Zayin. Arheg mishachen ra. Ad tchaber larasha. Ad yesh min ha'puanu. 1, 2, 3. And that's how the whole chapter is structured. This is strange. The Rabbi Yosef ben Yohanan says, 1, Yehi betcha patuch lervaha. Have an open house, welcoming guests. 2, ve'yu aniyim b'nei betecha, bring the poor into your house. 3, al tarbe siha im ha'isha. That's it. The addition be'ishto amru, who says that be'ishto amru? It's an anonymous author in a later generation who takes the word of Yosef ben Yohanan, which, even if we don't completely agree with them, we can understand that he came from the point of view of we want to limit the contact between men and women and just keep it within the family. But that anonymous author added, Be'ishto amru. He says when Yosef ben Yohanan said don't talk to the woman, he referred to one's own wife. And even more so, you're not allowed to talk to another woman. And that addition really created huge problems. And those are problems that exist until today within the Orthodox society, not all, but among the most extreme Hasidic courts, mainly Satmar and Gur or Ger, the men don't talk to their wives, and among the Gerers, not only they don't talk to their wives, a husband does not call his wife by name, ever. There's no first name basis. He called her Zukta, or like my wife, my spouse. People are a little more affectionate. Will call their wife Rebbitzin. The Rebbitzin, but it's it doesn't help. There's no intimacy. There's no connection. And same with in most of the Southern Hasidut. Not to even mention, women talking to other men. So the idea of hadarat nashim, of the exclusion of women, this Mishnah is really one of the sources that created a lot of problem. And in probably another generation, a later generation, someone added to that. So this Mishnah has 3 layers. In the first one, Yosef says, "Don't talk to a woman too much," referring to another woman. Then someone added, "No, that refers to your own wife, that you cannot talk to, definitely not to other women." The third generation came and added, when you do that, Yosef didn't say what is going to happen. He just said, "Don't do it." But they added punishment. Gorem ra le'atzmo, is causing evil to himself. He loses the time in which he could study Torah, and he will go to Gehinnom. Terrible things. So the Mishnah really put obstacles in our way. Now let's go back to Maimonides, and you realize when he's trying to understand, to explain why would a man not be allowed to talk to his own wife. So he says that because the conversation usually revolves around matters of sex, then he would not have time to pursue more noble ideas, and that is very disparaging, of course, but it is in line with Maimonides' worldview, even though later on we'll see that he does says that a husband must respect his wife, but he thought that women were inferior to men from an intellectual point of view. And when he speaks about philosophy, he says those are things that young children and women cannot attain. And have in mind also that for Maimonides, the only way to achieve your purpose in this world was by the study of philosophy. Some scholars believe that the reason Maimonides distilled his philosophical theory into the 13 principles of faith is because he wanted to make philosophy accessible to all. And he realized that most people would not be able to understand philosophy at his level, so he wrote it in those simple 13 principles. And so if Maimonides thinks that women are not intelligent and they cannot understand philosophy, then what kind of a conversation you can have with a woman? It must be about mundane things. And maybe added to that, because he lives in a quite affluent society where women don't have to worry about the chores at home or anything like that, he would think that if a woman talks to her husband, she's not going to tell him, "Why didn't you go and buy groceries or help me with cooking or anything like that," but she will talk to him about intimacy, and that is not right. And that is another thing that you have to have in mind, that probably a lot of the literature that was written around these matters were written by people who didn't feel comfortable with it, with being intimate or being sensitive and so on. So they translate their own discomfort into halakha. Just as, and there's a side comment, people who have a tendency towards obsessive compulsive disorder would have religious practices that are very, very intense. And there's actually a form of OCD which is reserved only for religious practices. It is called scrupulosity, just like being scrupulous, but scrupulosity is when you have this anxiety that if you don't follow halakha to the letter, something bad will happen to you. So let's say you read the Shema and you repeat it again and again and again, or you say the Amidah and you will say it for hours on end because you're afraid you didn't say it correctly. So I say, in the same way, it is possible that men who didn't feel comfortable with the intimacy were trying to legislate it and to avoid it as much as possible, whether it's in conversation or in physical contact. And Rambam really went to an extreme. He said that one is not even allowed to hug and kiss his own relatives, his mother and sister, after a certain age. So that is really something that we see in his writings, and we see that in. Now we'll go to Ilchot Ishut, the laws of marriage, 13, chapter 13, halacha 11. I brought a brief translation, but I'll translate here more in detail. He says this: מקום שדרכן שלא תצא אישה בשוק בכיפה שעל ראשה בלבד. There are certain places where a woman cannot go outside if she only has a head cover, unless עד שיהיה עליה רדידה חופת כל גופה כמו טלית. She has to wear a large scarf which covers her whole body, like a talit, like a robe. And in that case, the husband, the reason he writes that is to explain the obligation of the husband to provide this for her, because the halakha says in general that the husband must provide his wife with all her needs. So he says the local rules of modesty dictate what she needs. And if he's wealthy, he should give her more in the way that corresponds with his wealth. So she could go visit her father's house, or lebet ha'avel, or lebet ha'mishteh. Or she could go to the house of mourning, or to where there is a festivity, a wedding, etc. Every woman is allowed to go and visit her father. And she's allowed to go to the house of mourning and the house of celebration. That is a sort of a mutual relationship with her friends and relatives, so they will also come and visit her when she has a celebration or she's in mourning. She should not live in the house as one lives in prison, not being allowed to go out and come back. אבל גנאי לאישה שתהיה יוצאה תמיד פעם בחוץ, פעם ברחובות. He says, but still, even though I said, Maimonides says, even though I said that a woman can go and visit her father or mourners or join a festivity, it is inappropriate for her to be always outside. Pam b'chutz, pam b'rechovot. This is he draws on a verse from Proverbs. So she cannot be in the streets. V'yesh laba'al limnoa ishto mizeh, and the husband should prevent his wife from doing that. Ve'lo yanichena latzet ela kmo pa'am achad b'chodesh or pa'amayim b'chodesh kefi hatzorech. He should only go out once or twice a month as necessary. She'en yofi la'isha ela le'shev bezavid beta. The true beauty of a woman is for her to sit in the corner of the house. Shekach katuv kol kevuda bat melech penima. It is written in Tehillim chapter 45 that the glory of the daughter of the prince, of the daughter of the king, of the princess, is to be inside. Now, we have in mind that the houses that he speaks about are not a common apartment or even a house of today. In many cases, people lived in sort of courtyards, so there was some kind of social interaction. Still, I think those words are extremely upsetting and bothersome to think that here we have. I think the halakha, the way Maimonides phrases it, basically refers to the woman as someone who has no independence, no will of her own. She's the property of her husband, and he could decide whether she could go out or stay home. And even the occasions when she's allowed, right, we give her the permission to leave the house, is to visit her father, or basically to serve another man in her life, or her father, the parents are not mentioned. It's not Bet Horeha. I would like to see Bet Horeha, the house of her parents, both mother and father. No, but only the father is mentioned. It's a very patriarchal society. She's the property of the husband, but she's allowed to go visit the father, and she could go to visit mourners and revelers, so other people would come in and do the same with her. And Zavid Beta is a corner, could be a room in the house, but still, this is the mentality that is reflected by Maimonides. I don't think that the Maimonides would have ruled like this today, but I use this specific ruling by Maimonides when I have arguments, halachic arguments, with some people who consider themselves to be Maimonidean. In Orthodox Jews, they say we follow Maimonides, and that's the law, and that's what you should do. And I ask, do you follow Maimonides? If you're a married man, do you follow his ruling in chapter 13, 11 of the laws of marriage? And if you don't, that means that you understand that this halakha doesn't apply today for whatever reason Maimonides said it back then. So if that is the case, they have to review each and every halakha that Maimonides wrote. Because if we reject one of these halakhot, one of his rulings, because we understand that it has no relevance to our life today, then we should really do that with each and every halakha. And we should know the background. No one cannot say in a sweeping way, I follow Maimonides or I follow the Shulchan Aruch or any other posek, unless he does adhere to each and every letter of that psak. And another thing that we have, yes.
Okay, my computer is glitching a little.
There are people who call themselves Maimonidean or the followers of Maimonides, and they claim that they follow every ruling of Maimonides. So, some of them are sort of modern thinkers, but when an argument would come up, for example, Yom Tov Sheni, right, the second Yom Tov, and people would argue that the time has come to reconsider the decree of the rabbis from 2,000 years ago and realize that it doesn't apply today, they use Maimonides. Maimonides said that you can never change that, right, or something like that. So that's where I said, okay, here's the thing. Maimonides said that one's wife cannot leave the house more than once or twice a month. Do you follow that? If you don't follow that, then you acknowledge evolution of halakha and changing time. So reconsider what Maimonides said on that. But yes, there is a group of a large contingency who looks at Maimonides as the ultimate decision in halakha, and where he doesn't express his opinion, they will look at other books. But it's not only the halakha, the details of halakha, but also of his halakhic methodology, the way that he understands the evolution of the law from the time of the written law through the what is called the Great Assembly and the oral law, the Mishnah, etc., the Talmud. I have an audio class on in my Semicha program on Rambam's introduction to Mishneh Torah, where I expand on that. So you could listen to it there. Another thing that I want to comment on this halakha, that it's not only Maimonides, but this is one of the obstacles when you discuss modesty, is that I mentioned before. There's no indication in the Bible to the laws of modesty, but this is one of the verses. There are three verses: one from Torah, one from Nevi'im, one from Ketuvim, that are constantly used as a reference, as a proof that the Tanakh does care about modesty. This one from Tehillim is usually translated, and I know that from my students who studied in Midrashot in Eretz Israel, in religious schools for women in Israel, they read it to them like this: Kol kevoda, bat melech penima. The glory of the princess is to be indoors. So when you look at the verse like that, and it's from Tehillim, how can you argue, right? King David said that for a woman, the best thing to do is to sit at home, right? The problem is that when you go to the original text, you see that first of all the vowels are different, and like I said, I discussed it with women who studied in religious schools in Israel, and I said, do you know that the right reading of the pasuk is not kol kevuda, but rather kol kevuda with an u, like vav be'shuruk? And they said, no, impossible. We've heard it all our lives as kol kevoda. I said, yes, you've heard it. Did you ever bother to look in Tehillim and to see it in context and to see what it means? So here's the chapter in Tehillim. This was just briefly. It's chapter 45, from verse 1 to verse 9. The author seems to praise the king. He says, you're handsome, you're graceful, God blessed you, wear your sword, defeat your enemies, your throne will be established, you love justice, etc. In verse 9 is the where there's a paradigm shift. It's like going completely different directions, and he says, Mor va'ahalot ktsiot kol bigdotecha. Your garments are soaked with perfumes. In ivory palaces, people make you help you rejoice. He said, why would that be a praise for the king? It seems like a king that parties more than he takes care of his nation, right? And the key word here is bigdotecha. He uses the word beged, not in the usual conjugation in Hebrew, should have been begadecha, your garments, but bigdotecha, that sounds more like the infinitive of the root of betrayal, begidotecha. So he tells the king, there's something that you do wrong. What is it? Benot melachim bikerotecha nitzva shegal limincha beketer ofir. The princesses are either visit you or are near you with your glory, and the concubine stands next to you. The word that he uses to describe the queen is a very derogatory term with the verb shagal, shin gimel lamed, which in the other cases that it appears in the Tanakh, it is written shin gimel lamed, but it is read as shachav, to sleep with, because it means sexual interaction. So to use that term to describe the queen is really raises a red flag. And then in verses 11 and 12, he speaks to the princess. He says, listen and see and forget your nation and the house of your father. Let the king desire your beauty because he is your master. Bow down to him. The daughter of Tyre, you will be welcomed with offerings by the dignitaries of the nation. So what we see here is a woman, a princess, maybe from Tyre, maybe from Lebanon, right, or Phoenicia, who is being brought to the king. So the poem really speaks now. Instead, where it started with praising the king, it now tells us of that entourage that arrives at the palace with the woman, with the princess who comes from Tyre. She is being told, forget the house of your parents, forget your nation, just listen to the king. This is not something that we see as definitely not as modest. Look at this verse 14. Kol kvuda bat melech penima. Here it's translated, all glorious is the king's daughter within the palace. But the word kvuda means the things that are heavy, kaved, that she carries with her. Meaning she comes into the palace with all of her luggage, and she's followed by the virgins, her companions in her train, being brought unto thee. They shall be led with gladness and rejoicing. They shall enter into the king's palace. This is not about modesty. This is a poem that this Psalm 45 in Tehillim is a direct rebuke of, not direct, it's an indirect rebuke of the king, maybe King Solomon, maybe other kings who led an opulent life in the palace, partying, life of promiscuity. They were not happy with that. So it started with praising the king, but then it changes the tone and goes into that attack on his lifestyle. And I think it's the greatest irony that we use this verse, Kol Kevuda Bat Melech Penima, which describes a princess from another nation being added to the king's harem as a source to say that women should be modest and should be kept at home. So, but that probably was a result of the fact that there are no other verses in Tanakh that really suggest that. So there is this verse in Tehillim. The two other verses. One is in the book of Devarim, where the Torah says, "Ve'aya machanecha kadosh," your camp should be holy, but it refers to making sure that one is covers his bodily needs after relieving himself. So it had nothing to do with again with modesty. It's all about the laws of the military campaign. Here, this is the verse, chapter 23 in Deuteronomy, verse 14 and 15. It says, "They shall have a paddle among the weapons, and when you sit down, dig and cover whatever." And then it says, "Ve'aya machanecha kadosh." You see that your camp should be holy, so Hashem would see no unseemly thing among you. No mention of modesty. But this is the verse that is constantly mentioned. If you go through Mea Shearim in Yerushalayim or Kiryat Yoel near Monsey in New York, you will see big signs that say, "Ve'aya machanecha kadosh," let your camp be holy. And no one bothers to mention that it has nothing to do with modesty, and it's more about cleanliness and hygiene. And I think that the reason the Torah wrote it in such a way to say that God will abandon your camp if you don't do that is because otherwise people would not care too much about that. They're in war. Who cares about cleanliness or hygiene? But the giver of the law knows that this is for two reasons. It's important that they keep that. One, for safety and health reasons. The other, and that is something that has been understood by psychologists and sociologists only recently, is that when one does not take care of his own basic human dignity, he becomes apathetic to the suffering and troubles of others. So it was important to tell soldiers, even when you were at war, don't let yourself become an animal. Cover and clean yourself. That would guarantee a better treatment to other people. That is the second verse. This is from the Torah. And I'll show you just the one from Nevi'im, from prophets. This is from the book of Micah, in chapter 6, verse 8. The famous pasuk, "Yigid lecha adam ma tov u'ma Adonai doresh mimcha, ki ma'asot mishpat ve'avat chesed ve'atznei alechet im Elohecha." It had been told to you, O man, what is good and what the Lord requires of you, only to do justice and love mercy and walk humbly with God. So those last four words, ve'atznei alechet im Elohecha, be modest with God, are translated here correctly, walk humbly with God, which I think also means don't wear your religion on your sleeve. Don't show off with your religiosity. Keep it as a private matter between you and God. Instead, it has been taken out of context to say that one should dress modestly. So we have those three verses: Devarim 23:13, Micah 6:8, and Psalm 45:14. That have nothing to do with modesty, but each one was taken out of context and used as a proof because for lack of other sources. So now we go back to Maimonides, and you see when he says at the end of his statement, "She'en yofi la'isha ela leshev bezavid beta," שכך כתוב כל כבודה בת מלך פנימה, he is using a source that is not really reliable or not relevant to the discussion. And he prefaces with this statement: a woman should sit in the corner of her house. That, I think, he derives from a midrash on this verse in Tehillim. We go back to Tehillim for a second. In Psalm 128, Shir HaMa'alot, Ashrei kol yirei Adonai olech dechav, happy is the man who fears the Lord. In verse 3, Eshtecha kegefen poria beyarkete betecha, banecha kishtilei zetim saviv l'shulchanecha. Your wife shall be as a fruitful vine in the innermost part of your house, your children like olive plants round about your table. So here's the corner of the house, sort of from Tehillim 128. Your wife is like a vine at the arkete betecha, at the innermost part of the house, and your children are around the table. Maybe suggesting that the woman is not around the table. Is that a chauvinist psalm by itself? Maybe. He says in verse 4, "Hine kichen yivorach gever yirei Adonai." This is the blessing for a man. So the blessing for a man is to have a wife and children, but the wife is not part of the equation as having the children or having the man. So could be, maybe this is the perspective of the king, the one with the harem, as 18 wives. But I think Maimonides here combined the two verses, one from Tehillim 128 and one from Tehillim 45. We'll go back to Maimonides here. Now that we read those texts, and they're really disturbing, you should know that there is a book. There are several books, Kolech, at least 2 volumes, Kolech, Your Voice in the Feminine, printed in Israel, which are an anthology of essays by women and about women and their status and all that. And the question was raised of how do we deal with those texts that are offensive to women? And one rabbi suggested that we should bypass them. He says women who study in religious schools or advanced religious studies should not meet those texts. We should find alternative texts for them. That meaning, whenever there's a text that speaks about a woman's obligation or modesty and speaks about women in a derogatory manner, we should provide the students with another text that speaks about women in a nice way. And I think that this just intensifies the problem, because it makes people believe that everything is nice and dandy. Those students, those women who study in religious institutions might end up thinking that everybody respected women in the past, and there were no negative comments or statements about them. I'll conclude this session with one more halacha from the same chapter in Mishneh Torah of Maimonides. He says, one who made a vow which prevents his wife from going to the house of mourners or to the house of festivity should either nullify the vow or divorce her and pay her the ketubah. Because this is like putting her, if he completely forbids her from leaving the house, this is like putting her in prison. And we read this as, wow, beautiful. Now he does care about women. But look, right away, it says, if he argues that there are some questionable people there and he doesn't want them to go, he doesn't want his wife to associate with them, and we know that there are such people there, so even though he that limited window of freedom that the woman has of leaving the house once or twice a month, even that is narrowed by the possibility for a husband to say, I don't want you to go there because there are people that I don't like. And if you go to court and the court agrees, yeah, those are not people that we would like you to associate with, she could be prevented from leaving the house. Okay, so we'll conclude here, and in our next session we'll continue with modesty and the laws of behavior, usually directed at women, but also telling men how to behave with women.